The desert stretched endlessly under the bright Egyptian sun. Heat shimmered above the sand, and the wind carried fine grains across the open landscape. For most, this place was empty and lifeless. Yet for the small team of archaeologists working near the Valley of the Kings, it was the most alive it had been in centuries. Beneath their feet, something waited. The dig site was quiet except for the steady sound of brushes, picks, and shovels. Among the workers stood Omar, a young archaeologist who had dreamed all his life of uncovering secrets buried under the desert. His hands were steady, his eyes sharp, and his heart full of curiosity. He had studied history, hieroglyphs, and the legends of forgotten rulers. But nothing had prepared him for what he was about to find. The team's leader, Professor Nadia, called out to the workers to stop. She had noticed a strange hollow sound when one of the tools struck a stone slab. Everyone gathered as Omar and two others carefully cleared away the sand. Soon the outline of a hidden chamber door revealed itself. Unlike the usual carved entrances of known tombs, this one was smooth and cold, made of a material that did not look like ordinary stone. Nadia frowned and touched the surface. It was metallic, yet it had been buried for thousands of years without rust or decay. Strange lines ran across it in patterns, almost like symbols, but they glowed faintly when her hand brushed over them. The team exchanged uneasy glances. "This is not like anything we've seen before," she whispered. Omar's heart raced. Ancient Egypt was full of mysteries, but nothing in their studies spoke of glowing metal doors. He felt both fear and excitement as the team worked together to open it. With a deep grinding sound, the door slid aside, releasing a rush of stale air that smelled of dust and age. Inside, the chamber was vast and silent. Torches and portable lamps lit the walls, revealing carvings and murals. Unlike ordinary hieroglyphs, these were sharper, etched with precision as though carved by machines rather than human hands. Images of a tall queen with sharp eyes dominated the walls. She was shown not only ruling over people but also standing beside towering figures that did not look human. The workers whispered nervously, some crossing themselves, others stepping back. Legends had long spoken of a queen whose name was erased from records because of the fear she inspired. Some called her the Forgotten Queen, others the Dark Queen. She was said to have ruled not only with power but with something that felt beyond human. As the team pressed deeper into the chamber, Omar noticed a pedestal in the center. Upon it rested a strange object shaped like a box but smooth and seamless, as if crafted from a single piece of metal. Lines of light pulsed slowly across its surface, glowing in rhythm like a heartbeat. "Careful," Nadia warned as Omar approached it. He knelt beside the pedestal and examined the object. It seemed alive, humming faintly as though it waited for something. He brushed away the dust and suddenly the glow brightened. The box responded to his touch. A low hum filled the chamber and the lights along the walls flickered. Everyone froze, fear tightening their throats. The object opened with a soft hiss, revealing a core of spinning crystal that shone with pure white light. The air grew warmer and the ground seemed to tremble. "What is this?" one of the workers whispered. Before anyone could answer, the crystal emitted a beam of light that shot upward through the ceiling, piercing the sky above the desert. Outside, the beam rose high into the heavens like a pillar of fire. Satellites orbiting Earth caught the signal instantly, registering an unknown frequency unlike anything seen before. At the dig site, panic spread. Some workers fled while others dropped to their knees in fear, but Omar stood rooted in place, staring at the glowing core. He felt no fear, only awe. He knew deep in his heart that this was not just a relic. It was a message. Miles away, in research centers and observatories, alarms sounded. Scientists rushed to decode the strange broadcast. The signal carried structured patterns, not random noise. Something intelligent was embedded within it. Governments were alerted and military officials demanded answers. Who had sent this message and why now, after thousands of years of silence? Professor Nadia forced her voice to remain calm. "Close it. Shut it down before it goes further." But it was too late. The device pulsed brighter and brighter as though feeding on energy from the air itself. Every attempt to move or cover it failed. The chamber now vibrated with power, and strange markings along the walls glowed in response, as if the Queen's image itself had awakened. In the sky above, the beam finally faded, leaving the world with questions but no answers. Silence returned to the crypt, yet everyone knew the truth. The signal had gone out. Someone, somewhere in the darkness of space, had received it. Omar's breath shook as he whispered the thought forming in every mind present. They will come. The signal had been sent, and the world could not ignore it. Across the globe, news channels spoke only of the strange beam that rose from the desert sky. Governments argued in secret rooms. Scientists filled their boards with strange codes, and ordinary people whispered of ancient prophecies. Some said it was a sign from the past, others believed it was a warning of the future. At the dig site, the chamber had been sealed again. Guards stood at every corner, and no one was allowed to enter without permission. Omar, however, could not rest. Every night he thought about the glowing box, the spinning crystal, and the queen's image that had lit up the walls. He felt as if the queen herself had reached across time to send her voice into the stars. Professor Nadia was no less troubled. She met with officials who demanded answers, yet she had none to give. The device was beyond human knowledge. It was not built with tools of stone or copper. It was something far more advanced, and the queen had hidden it inside her tomb. Then, only 3 weeks after the signal, the sky changed. It began with a shadow in space. Astronomers noticed a moving object, larger than any natural rock, slowly approaching Earth's orbit. The object moved with purpose, slowing and turning as if guided by intelligence. The news broke across every screen. A ship was coming. Fear spread quickly. Some prayed, others panicked. Yet above the fear there was curiosity. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone, and now they had their answer. The ship was enormous, stretching miles in length, its surface gleaming with shifting patterns of light. Governments prepared their defenses, though deep down they knew no weapon on Earth could match such a vessel. Fighter jets circled, satellites locked on, and armies waited. But when the ship arrived, it did not attack. It simply hovered in silence high above the desert where the signal had first been sent. The world held its breath. On the 4th day, a light beam descended from the ship, reaching the sands near the sealed crypt. From within the beam, figures appeared. They were tall, with long limbs and pale, shimmering skin that seemed almost translucent. Their eyes glowed faintly, not with fire, but with calm brilliance. The guards aimed their weapons, but Nadia ordered them to hold. Omar stood beside her, his heart pounding. The figures moved gracefully, without fear, as though they had been here before. One of them stepped forward. Its voice echoed not through sound, but directly into the minds of those present. "We have answered the call. The beacon of the Queen has been awakened." Nadia swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The being's eyes turned toward her. "We are the Keepers. Long ago we served under the rule of the one you call Queen." Her shadow stretched across the stars. She commanded fleets and worlds. When she chose this land as her throne, we obeyed. But when her reign ended, we left. Her command was silence. Until now, Omar felt a chill run down his spine. The murals, the strange metal, the power in the chamber, it was all real. The Queen had not only ruled Egypt, she had ruled beyond Earth itself. Another of the beings spoke, its voice heavier. "The signal you released is not only a call to us. Others will hear it too. Enemies of old, who once feared her name, will know this world has awakened her legacy." The word sent waves of fear across the human guards. If these beings with their towering ship spoke of enemies greater than themselves, what kind of danger was about to fall upon Earth? Nadia tried to stay calm. "We disturbed her crypt only to study history. We did not mean to bring danger." The leader's eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. "History does not forgive so easily. You must understand what you have touched." She was not only feared by men, but by entire civilizations. Her will was iron, and her ambition had no limit. As the beings spoke, Omar noticed something in their tone. It was not loyalty nor respect. It was fear. Even after centuries, the Queen's shadow bound them. Suddenly, the sky above shifted. The great vessel in orbit changed its lights, pulsing as if answering some unseen signal. One of the beings turned sharply toward the heavens. "They are coming. The signal has been traced." "Who?" Nadia asked quickly. The being's reply was heavy. "Those who swore never to let her rise again. If they believe she walks once more, they will burn this world to ash." The desert air grew tense. Soldiers whispered in confusion. Omar's chest tightened with the weight of their words. The crypt was no longer just a burial site. It was the key to a war that had been silent for thousands of years. The beings stepped back toward the beam of light. "Prepare yourselves, humans. The stars will look upon you not as strangers, but as players in a war you did not choose. If you cannot stand, you will fall." In a flash of light, they vanished, rising back into the ship. Moments later, The ship pulled away from orbit, vanishing into the void of space, leaving Earth shaken and alone. For days, the world debated what it meant. Some demanded the crypt be destroyed. Others called for deeper study. But Omar understood one thing clearly. The arrival had not been the end. It was the beginning. The Queen's secret had been released, and nothing could place it back in silence. He looked at the desert sky and whispered the truth to himself. They are coming, and humanity must be ready. The desert crypt was no longer just a place of history. It had become the center of fear and debate across the world. After the ship departed, governments sent more soldiers, more scientists, and more machines to the site. The sand trembled under heavy vehicles, and the once quiet valley now echoed with the sound of engines and voices. Professor Nadia led the study team, but she felt the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. Every government wanted answers. Every nation feared that what slept beneath the desert might rise again. Omar spent his night staring at the murals he had copied into his notes. He traced the sharp lines of the Queen's image, her cold eyes staring from the stone. The beings from the ship had not lied. The Queen was shown not only on a throne of gold, but also beside tall figures with shining skin. In one carving, she raised a staff that released beams of light against her enemies. In another, she stood at the front of great ships that looked like stars shaped into weapons. "These are not myths," Omar whispered as he turned the pages of his notebook. "This is history." Inside the crypt, deeper chambers were slowly uncovered. Each one revealed something stranger than the last. There were statues of soldiers, but their armor did not resemble the armor of ancient Egypt. It was smooth and seamless, shaped like something grown rather than forged. Some statues even seemed too lifelike, their eyes fixed forward as if they waited for orders. Then came the discovery that shook even the strongest hearts. At the far end of the chamber, the team found a sealed wall marked with strange glowing lines. Unlike hieroglyphs, these patterns shifted like flowing water, changing shape when touched by light. With great effort, the team cut through the stone around it. When the wall finally opened, a new chamber revealed itself. In the center stood a crystal sarcophagus. Its surface shimmered faintly, and inside lay the body of a woman. Her face was sharp and regal, her skin pale as marble, preserved as though time itself had bent around her. She wore a crown of black metal, and her arms were crossed upon her chest. Nadia felt her breath catch in her throat. It is her. The Queen. Omar stepped closer, trembling. The murals had shown her countless times, yet to see her so perfectly preserved was something far beyond imagination. She did not look like a corpse. She looked like someone asleep, waiting to wake. The sarcophagus was not stone or glass, but a strange crystal that pulsed faintly with inner light. Machines brought by the scientists confirmed what their eyes could not believe. Energy still flowed inside, keeping the body untouched by decay. "It is not death," one of the researchers said. "It is preservation. This chamber is a machine." The word spread like fire through the camp. Soldiers whispered nervously. Some wanted the chamber sealed forever. Others wanted it destroyed. But Nadia and Omar both knew that such choices were no longer simple. The signal had already gone out. Destroying the Queen now would not stop what was already coming. As days passed, the team studied the walls of the new chamber. More murals told the story of the Queen's rise. She had not been born in Egypt. She had arrived with those who came from the stars. She took the throne of men and gods, using her knowledge to bend nations to her will. For a time, Earth was her kingdom and the stars her empire. But something had happened, something that forced her to seal herself away. The murals ended not with her death, but with her promise. "I will rise again when the stars align and the world has grown strong." Omar could not shake the words. He wrote them again and again in his notebook, as though their meaning might reveal itself. Was this the Queen's plan? Had she intended the signal to be activated one day? Or was it an accident waiting for curious hands to uncover? At night, when the camp grew quiet, Omar returned to the chamber. He stood before the sarcophagus, staring at her face. There was no fear in him now, only awe. He whispered softly, though he knew she could not hear. "Why did you leave this behind?" "Why us?" He placed his hand upon the crystal. For a moment he thought he saw her chest rise as though she breathed. He pulled back quickly, heart racing. It must have been a trick of light, he told himself. Yet deep inside he felt the truth. She was not gone. She was waiting. Beyond the desert, the world grew restless. Reports spread of strange signals detected in space. Some said smaller ships had been seen near the edge of the solar system, moving like hunters. Governments rushed to prepare their defenses, but the fear was clear. The crypt had called out, and the universe had answered. Inside the chamber, the crystal sarcophagus glowed faintly, brighter with each passing night. Machines detected rising energy levels, but no one understood how or why. Omar began to feel that the queen herself had heard the call, and her time of silence was ending. One evening, as the sun fell and the stars began to shine, Omar stood once more before the crystal. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and strong. He whispered into the quiet chamber, his voice trembling with both fear and wonder. She is not history, she is the future. The desert camp had grown into a fortress. Tall fences circled the site, watchtowers stood at the edges, and armed patrols marched day and night. Nations had sent their best soldiers, fearing that something inside the crypt might awaken. Yet even with all their preparations, none of them truly understood what they faced. Inside the chamber, the sarcophagus pulsed brighter with every passing day. Machines recorded energy levels climbing beyond their instruments. Professor Nadia ordered constant monitoring, but the scientists had no way to stop it. Omar spent hours studying the walls, searching for clues in the murals, but the images only confirmed what they already feared. The queen had never been defeated. She had chosen her own silence, and now she was stirring again. One evening, as the wind howled across the valley, a sudden tremor shook the ground. Sand rolled down the sides of the dig site, and lamps swung violently. Soldiers rushed to their posts, shouting in alarm. Inside the crypt, the floor cracked open, and from the darkness below rose tall figures of metal. They were guardians, shaped like soldiers, but their bodies were smooth and silver, their eyes glowing with steady light. They moved with precision, standing in perfect formation as if awaiting orders. Their armor carried the same flowing lines as the queen's murals, proof that they were not human creations. The soldiers outside the chamber raised their weapons. Professor Nadia shouted for them to wait, but the guardians moved first. With a sudden flash, beams of light shot from their arms, striking the camp's vehicles and equipment. Metal melted, fires erupted, and panic spread. The air filled with the roar of engines, gunfire, and the screams of men trying to hold their ground. Omar stood frozen, his heart pounding as the guardians advanced. They did not fight like wild machines. They fought with discipline, each step in rhythm, each strike calculated. They ignored the scientists and focused on the armed soldiers, dismantling weapons and burning defenses. These are not attackers, Omar realized aloud. They are enforcers. They are carrying out her last command. Professor Nadia pulled him back as one of the beams struck the wall beside them. Whatever they are, they will destroy us all if we stay here. We need to retreat, but Omar shook his head. His eyes were fixed on the murals. No, look, they are not meant to kill everyone. They are guarding her. They are waiting for her awakening. Nadia hesitated, but the truth of his words was clear. The guardians did not chase those who ran. They stood in a circle around the sarcophagus, their glowing eyes watching for any who dared approach. They were not here to conquer the world. They were here to protect their queen until she rose again. Outside the crypt, the camp was in chaos. Soldiers fired heavy weapons, but the beams of light cut through them with ease. Vehicles exploded in flames, sending smoke into the night sky. Communications failed as strange signals jammed the air. The entire valley became a battlefield, but one side fought with technology thousands of years beyond human reach. Amid the destruction, Omar and Nadia retreated with a small group of survivors. They gathered inside a supply tent, their faces pale with fear. The ground still trembled as the guardians marched above. A young soldier spoke with a shaking voice. If these are only her guards, what happens when she herself awakens? Silence followed his words. None of them had the answer. Nadia finally spoke. The beings who came warned us. They said her enemies would return if they believed she still lived. If we cannot control this, Earth will be caught between her power and theirs. Omar clenched his fists. He thought of the Queen's promise carved into the stone. I will rise again. It was no longer just words. It was happening. That night, the surviving scientists studied the data from their machines. They discovered that the sarcophagus was drawing energy from the environment, heat from the desert, power from the camp's own equipment, even from the planet itself. It was like a heart beating louder with every moment. The guardians, meanwhile, began to spread outward. Some marched to the edges of the valley, standing in silent ranks. Others dug into the sand, placing strange devices that pulsed with light. It was as though they were preparing the land for their queen's return. By dawn, the valley was no longer under human control. Smoke rose from the ruins of the camp, and only a handful of soldiers remained. Most had fled into the desert, carrying tales of machines made of light. Omar stayed near the chamber, his eyes tired but determined. He felt that running would change nothing. No matter where they went, the queen's presence would follow. He turned to Nadia and said, "We cannot fight her with weapons. If humanity has a chance, it will be through understanding. We need to know why she sealed herself away. That may be the only key to stopping her." Nadia nodded slowly. "Then we keep studying, even if the world around us falls into fear." Far above the Earth, satellites tracked new signals. More objects were entering the solar system, small but fast. Unknown ships moving in formation. The warning of the keepers was coming true. The enemies of the queen were approaching, ready to finish a war that had been silent for ages. In the valley below, the guardians stood tall, their glowing eyes fixed on the rising sun. Around them, the devices buried in the sand pulsed like living hearts. The queen's return was no longer a secret. It was a countdown. The valley lay in ruins. The camp, once filled with noise of machines and voices, now stood silent, broken by smoke and the sound of shifting sand. The guardians of metal moved slowly across the ground, their glowing eyes never leaving the crystal sarcophagus at the heart of the crypt. Omar had not slept in 2 days. His body ached, his clothes were torn, but his mind refused to rest. He watched the sarcophagus pulse with steady light, each glow stronger than the last. The queen was no longer a figure of stone and murals. She was here, preserved within crystal, waiting for her moment. Professor Nadia sat near the wall of the chamber, her face pale. She studied the readings from their machines. The energy levels were no longer rising slowly. They surged upward, doubling with every hour. "It cannot be stopped," she said softly. "The process has already begun." The small group of survivors listened in silence. Soldiers who once carried pride in their weapons now stared with empty eyes, knowing their strength was useless. One whispered, "If she wakes, what happens to us?" No one answered. As the night deepened, the glow filled the entire chamber. The guardians took their places in a perfect circle around the sarcophagus. They stood as statues, silent and unshaken, their bodies shining like silver under the light. Then, without warning, the crystal cracked. A sharp sound echoed across the chamber. Thin lines spread across the surface like spiderwebs of light. The air grew heavy, pressing against every chest as if the room itself had begun to breathe. Omar felt his heart pound louder than the sound itself. He stepped closer, unable to stop himself. "Stand back," Nadia called, her voice shaking. But Omar did not move. His eyes were locked on the figure inside. The crack spread wider, and with a final burst of light, the crystal broke apart, falling away like glass turned to dust. For the first time in thousands of years, the queen opened her eyes. They glowed faintly, golden and sharp, as if fire had been trapped within them. She breathed slowly, her chest rising with calm strength. The crown upon her head shimmered in the glow, and when she stood, every guardian lowered its head as though kneeling. The chamber filled with silence so deep it pressed into every ear. Then she spoke, her voice strong and smooth, carrying not only through air but directly into the minds of those present. "I have returned." The soldiers stepped back in fear. Some raised their weapons, but their hands shook too much to aim. Omar could not move. His body trembled, but his mind was locked on her presence. She was not like the statues or the guardians. She was alive, powerful, and commanding in a way that no human ruler had ever been. Professor Nadia tried to find her voice. "You should not be here. You sealed yourself away. Why awaken now?" The queen turned her golden eyes toward Nadia. "Because you called me. The beacon has been lit. My silence is ended." Her gaze shifted to Omar, and for a moment he felt the weight of her attention. It was as though she could see every thought in his mind, every fear, every hope. His knees almost gave way under the pressure, but she did not harm him. She only studied him. "You are curious," she said softly, "and unafraid. That will serve you well." The guardian stepped aside, leaving a clear path for her. She walked with slow grace, her long robes flowing though no wind touched them. Each step carried the weight of authority, and yet she moved without haste. It was as if the entire world had already bent to her presence. Nadia forced herself to speak again. "If you rise, you will bring danger to our world. Others are coming. Your enemies will destroy us. The queen paused. Her eyes narrowed. They are weak. They always were. They feared me then and they fear me now. If they come, they will fall. Her words echoed like a storm in the chamber, yet Omar felt something deeper. There was no doubt in her tone, no uncertainty. She truly believed she could face whatever came. The soldiers near the entrance whispered among themselves. Some wanted to flee, others argued they must try to fight. But Omar knew that their weapons would break like sand before steel. The queen's power was beyond them. Suddenly, the ground shook again. The devices the guardians had buried outside the crypt began to activate, sending tall beams of light into the sky. The valley glowed with strange patterns, lines of energy connecting like a great circle. It was as though the entire desert had become part of her awakening. The queen raised her hand and the beams answered her. The sky turned bright, painted with shifting colors. For miles, people in nearby towns looked up in awe and fear, not knowing what force had returned to the earth. Inside the chamber, Omar felt his fear change into something else. It was not respect and not worship. It was the realization that the world itself had changed. Humanity could no longer think of itself as alone or safe. The queen's awakening meant the beginning of something far greater than any history book had ever told. Professor Nadia leaned close to Omar and whispered, "She is not just waking.
She is preparing."
Whatever her plan is, we are part of it now." The queen turned back to them, her golden eyes glowing brighter. "This world has forgotten my rule, but I will remind it, and when the stars send their hunters, you will stand at my side or be crushed beneath them." Her voice carried no anger, no mercy, only certainty. She had awakened and she had claimed the world once more. Omar's breath shook as he whispered under his breath, not sure if it was hope or fear. Humanity must choose. The queen's awakening sent shockwaves across the world. Within hours, satellites captured images of glowing lines across the desert where her guardians had planted their strange devices. Entire nations watched the lights forming a vast circle, pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth itself. News channels broadcast the scenes endlessly, and people everywhere whispered the same words. The queen has returned. Governments moved quickly. Meetings stretched long into the night as leaders argued over what to do. Some wanted to destroy the crypt with every weapon they had, but military experts warned that no missile or bomb could pierce the energy field that now surrounded the valley. Others argued for negotiation, though none knew how to bargain with a being who had ruled both earth and stars. Among the people, fear grew, but so did determination. The memory of the guardians burning the camp spread through surviving soldiers, but their stories carried more than fear. They spoke of how the machines ignored those without weapons. They spoke of how humanity was not hunted but instead pushed aside, as though the queen wanted obedience, not destruction. That distinction mattered. It meant humanity still had a choice. Omar traveled with Professor Nadia to the capital, where they were asked to speak before a council of leaders. His voice shook as he described the murals, the sarcophagus, and the queen's first words. Nadia spoke firmly about the danger. "She will not stop," she told them. "Her enemies are already coming, and she will use us as her shield. If we bow to her, we lose our freedom. If we resist her, we may lose our world. But we must decide together." The council hall grew silent. The decision was not simple. Yet one by one, the leaders agreed that humanity could not kneel. The queen might have power, but history had shown that human strength was not only in weapons but in unity and will. For the first time in generations, nations that had once stood apart began to work as one. Factories shifted their focus. Engineers studied the broken remains of the guardians left at the valley's edge. Scientists pored over data collected from the sarcophagus chamber, searching for patterns they could turn into weapons or shields. Slowly, humanity began to learn. The guardians' energy beams could melt metal, but they had weaknesses. Their joints moved in certain patterns, and their signals could be disrupted by bursts of radio waves. In hidden labs, prototypes were built. Weapons designed not to match the queen's power, but to exploit the smallest cracks in her machines. At the same time, scientists worked to create shields that could resist the beams for more than a few seconds. Every test, every discovery was shared among nations. The world had never united so quickly. Meanwhile, the queen prepared her own rise. From the valley, her voice spread across the world through strange signals that entered radio towers and television screens. She spoke not with threats but with certainty. "You live because I allow it. Join me and the stars will fear your name. Resist me and you will be forgotten. Her words divided many. Some small groups bowed in fear, claiming loyalty to her. But the majority stood firm. Humanity had faced kings, empires, and tyrants before. This was greater, yes, but the spirit of resistance was the same. Omar returned to the valley with a special unit of scientists and soldiers. They came not to bow but to learn more. As they moved through the ruins of the camp, Omar studied the glowing circle in the desert. He realized it was not just a defense. It was a gate, a signal to guide ships from the stars. They are coming, he said quietly. Her enemies, maybe even her allies. This is not only about us anymore. It is about the galaxy watching to see if humanity stands or falls. Professor Nadia placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we must show them we will not break, the soldiers nodded. They were tired, scarred, and afraid. But their eyes carried a fire that no guardian beam could extinguish. That night, as the desert wind swept across the valley, the first battle lines were drawn. Drones circled the sky, jammers were planted in the sand, and hidden cannons aimed toward the crypt. Humanity was preparing not for survival but for defiance. In cities across the world, people marched with banners demanding strength, not surrender. Children painted stars on walls, writing words of hope. Farmers donated fuel, factories gave materials, and old rivalries were put aside. For once, Earth was not divided. It stood together. The Queen watched all of this from her throne inside the crypt. Her golden eyes glowed as she spoke to her guardians. They resist. They have grown since my silence. Good. Their strength will serve me when the storm arrives. But she did not understand. Humanity did not rise because of her command. Humanity rose because it always had. When faced with darkness, it lit a fire. When threatened with chains, it broke them. Omar stood at the edge of the crypt, looking at the glowing sky above the valley. His voice was steady now, stronger than it had ever been. We are not your servants. We are not your shield. We are humanity, and we will stand. The words carried through the night like a promise. The Queen had awakened, but so had humanity. And soon the stars would learn the truth. The desert was silent before dawn. The glowing circle of light that surrounded the Queen's crypt pulsed brighter with every passing hour. Scientists warned that the energy inside was building to a peak. Omar stood with the soldiers at the edge of the valley, watching as the air shimmered like heat rising from stone. He knew this was not only a battle for land. It was a battle for the future of humankind. Inside the crypt, the Queen prepared her throne. Her guardian stood in perfect formation, waiting for her command. Her golden eyes glowed with calm certainty. For her, this moment was not war. It was destiny. She believed humanity would kneel, just as her armies of old once had. She believed resistance was only noise before silence. But outside the crypt, humanity was no longer afraid. Nations had worked side by side to prepare. Jammers were hidden across the desert, ready to disrupt the Guardian's signals. Shields made from new alloys were mounted on armored vehicles. Weapons built from fragments of her own machines were aimed at the crypt. Every soldier, every scientist, and every pilot knew they might not return. But none of them turned away. As the sun rose, the Queen's voice echoed across the desert without speakers, carried by strange energy. You have no path but to kneel. I have ruled before. I will rule again. Join me, and I will raise you above all others. Resist me, and you will be forgotten by time. The words struck heavy, but Omar stepped forward, his voice firm. We are not yours to command. We are not forgotten people. We are humanity, and we choose our own path. For the first time since her awakening, the Queen frowned. She raised her hand, and the Guardians marched forward. Their metal feet crushed the sand. Their eyes glowed with fire, and beams of energy shot across the valley. The battle began. Vehicles roared forward, their shields glowing as they absorbed the first blasts. Soldiers fired weapons that cracked the Guardians' armor. Drones filled the sky, dropping jammers that sent out waves of static. For a moment, the Guardians stumbled as their signals crossed. The humans cheered, pressing the attack, but the Queen only raised her other hand. The glowing circle in the desert flared like a star, and from the sand rose new machines, larger and stronger than before. They moved like living beasts of iron, sweeping aside human weapons with tails of fire. Fear spread again, but the soldiers held the line. Professor Nadia shouted orders through the comms. Target their joints. Remember what we learned? They are strong but not perfect. The battle raged for hours. Metal clashed. Beams cut through the air and explosions shook the ground. Many fell, but humanity refused to break. For every guardian that rose, a human stood against it. For every strike of fire, a shield was lifted. At last, Omar and a small group broke through the outer defenses. They ran into the crypt, carrying the last jammer that could disrupt the Queen's command signal. The chamber was vast, lit by pillars of energy. At the center, the Queen stood upon her throne, her presence towering though she never moved. "You are brave," she said, her voice echoing against the walls. "But bravery without wisdom is dust. Do you not see that I offer protection? Without me, the stars will devour you." Omar's chest burned with exhaustion, but his voice was steady. "We are not children to be sheltered. We are not chains to be held. If the stars come, we will face them as ourselves, not as shadows of your reign." The Queen rose, her form glowing with power. "Then you will fall." In that moment, Nadia activated the jammer. A wave of energy burst through the chamber. The guardians outside froze mid-strike. The great machines stumbled, their glowing eyes flickered, and the circle of light dimmed. The Queen staggered as the connection between her and her army cracked. Her golden eyes narrowed. For the first time, she looked uncertain. She stepped forward, but Omar stood his ground. All around them, the crypt began to shake as the machines collapsed. "You cannot destroy me," the Queen said. "Even if you seal me, I will return." "My name cannot fade," Omar met her gaze. "Maybe your name will remain, but it will not be power. It will be a warning, a memory of what humanity overcame." The ceiling cracked and sand poured into the chamber. The walls shuddered and the throne began to sink. The Queen tried to reach forward, but the ground beneath her crumbled. With a sound like thunder, the crypt began to collapse. Omar and Nadia ran as stone fell around them. They barely reached the surface before the valley roared like a volcano. Dust and fire burst into the sky. When it cleared, the crypt was gone, swallowed by the desert. The glowing circle was no more. The Queen was sealed once again. Silence followed. Then cheers rose from the soldiers across the valley. Humanity had not only survived, it had stood firm against a power that once ruled the stars. That night, the world celebrated. Cities lit their skies with lights, not of fear, but of hope. Leaders spoke of unity, of courage, of a new chapter where Earth would no longer fear what lay beyond. Humanity had faced its test and had chosen freedom. Omar looked up at the stars. For the first time, he did not see them as cold and distant. He saw them as a future waiting to be claimed. Beside him, Nadia smiled. "Do you think they are watching?" she asked. "Yes," Omar said softly. "And now they know who we are."